Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Money and Mindset Podcast. Here with your host, Sheryka, Alford, and
Anntricia Bray Smith.
we are here today continuing our Life Stages series. And if you missed our last episode, we were talking to special guest Snow White Bray, our 20-something-year-old. So if you missed that episode, be sure to go back and listen to it because it really was a treat. Today, we're going to look at 30s. What was life like back in the 30s as far as finances were concerned and lessons learned? And Trisha, you remember the 30s?
I remember them dirty 30s. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, I was really in the thick of raising my young ladies in my 30s. So, elementary age, kids, single parent, career, lots of transitioning challenges that arise, and really had to make some tough decisions and some tough sacrifices. There were times that financially, we didn't have enough to put food on the table, bread, we had to go borrow money, just go get a loaf of bread, maybe some potatoes or something just to make it through the week or make it to payday. So, yeah, I think back in my 30s, a lot of challenges, but a lot of growth and development, a lot of really understanding what am I doing with my life, and is this all that I can expect from life, and how do I get more out of life? Not only that, but change the direction in which now, hey, I got kids. Are they going to follow this pattern, or am I going to break some cycles somewhere, not only financially, but mentally as well? I can think back really having a poverty mindset, making money. I knew I made more money than the generations before me, but why is my money not producing more for my family than what those past have done? So, really taking that time in my 30s just as a reflection, it was a wake up call, lots of learning experiences. Still sometimes even in my parents' pocketbooks, because I was not able to manage financially. So yeah, I can think back a lot of things on being 30 in that those years. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so you said that was kind of like a time of awakening for you. You reflected back and realized because of your responsibilities with your daughters. I think, and I think that happens with a lot of us, that 30 time period. I know for me, by the time I hit 30, I had already been married for mm, 6 years and one and a half child. And on top of that, I was a student. I was going to school because I was one of the non-traditional students. I opted to not go to college right after high school. Um, but yeah, 30s, that was a time of also awakening for me too, because of course I'm cleaning up things from the 20s as far as clearing out debt and that sort of thing. So I think for a lot of us, that's true. Um, One thing that I really learned from my 30s, one of the key lessons was the pay yourself first. That's when that really hit home for me because trying to clear up 20s mistakes from the 20s, I focused so much on let me clean this up, let me clean this up, and because I wasn't paying myself first, I ended up in the same predicament, but later figured out this is a problem. I need this cushion. So, yeah. What do you think is there anything that you think someone could have maybe told you in your 20s that would have better prepared you for your 30s, or no?
Well, I'm just thinking at my family dynamics. I'm thinking about what that looks like for me. I was the first one. I was the first one in my family to go out and get that education and start that career. And so, not to say that they haven't done it since then, but I'm I feel like I had been the one that was leading the pack, and many of the things that were learned were learned because I learned it and went back to reteach the family. So I feel like that I was leading that way in really understanding what the family dynamics are and what they look like and how they impact the generations. And so there were no lessons learned. You know, we were uh, poor. I was born into a poor family. I was raised with a poverty mindset. Lots of love, don't get me wrong, but financially, you know, just not a lot to scratch and to learn those lessons that uh, I now realize that are important. And so many of the things that you see my daughter struggle with financially now is because of the poor lessons learned uh, environmentally, you know, because this is just a way that uh, we didn't know any better. And
Hmm.
just here in the past several years to where I've really uh, trying to understand finances and change the dynamics of that financial legacy and trying to build wealth and that financial freedom and all those things. Now they're learning lessons, but they just didn't learn them as young girls, you know, as children, because I didn't have the tools and resources to give that to them. So many of the poor habits and getting into debt at an early age of loans and really not understanding the dynamics of utilizing that community that you have, that family support, so that you can be in a better place financially down the road. A lot of those I take accountability for that because I did not teach them that until here in the recent years.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I applaud you because your girls, I don't know what they learned in the earlier years, but I know now they seem to be on track. And if you missed the previous episode, go back and listen to it because one of her daughters, Snow White Bray, joined us. She dropped some words of wisdom for us all, regardless of our age, as far as sacrifices and the type of people you surround yourself with. So be sure to go back and listen to that. Um, if you're just now joining us on the Money and Mindset podcast, we're talking about the life stages of finances in your 30s. And one thing I want to mention, and a lot of times we don't think about this in our 30s, but we're investing for retirement. I know, like all of us, in your 30s, by then you probably have a kid or two, maybe a spouse, a mortgage, and we get so wrapped up in the day to day, and we don't think about the future or that far in advance in the future to think that maybe I should start setting back something for retirement. But the sooner you do it, the better because you have time on your side. And so that way, um, you may not have to put as much back and it'll still have enough time to work as hard or harder for you than if you wait until, later, until 40s, 50s, or whenever. So if you're listening to us, even if you're in your 20s and you're listening to us, you can start saving for retirement in your 20s. I wish that's the lesson that I would have learned in my 20s. So just think about that. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. If your job offers a retirement plan and offers a company match, then maybe try to at least contribute enough to get your match. Or if not, you can invest in what's called a Roth IRA, an individual retirement account. So we'll tell you more about that later, but just keep in mind it's not too early to start thinking about retirement.
Absolutely. And I'm just thinking about those in their 30s. I'm just trying to think about what that looks like here for the ones that I know. And many of them are single parents. Many of them have multiple kids. Many of them are not secure in their career at this moment, and that's okay. But there are several things in your 30s that you should have set in place. And one of those is life insurance, and another one of those is some kind of savings or financial plan, like she said. And I do suggest the Roth IRA, because single parents, we take for granted that yes, we just have that one income, and that we're young and we're healthy, and our kids are young and healthy. We take for granted thinking that we're going to live forever. We don't know what lies down the road, especially in times that we live in now. So, if those are one of the things that you don't, two of the things that you don't have set in place for your family right now, and you're 30 years old and you're out here listening to me, then those are some of the things that you really should consider right now, regardless of what your income is, regardless of your health status. You're thinking you're going to live forever. Uh, I'm thinking that also about a population of 30-year-olds who are already addicted and have been addicted, and they're living their best lives. You know, you don't know, being addicted, uh, when you're going to have an adverse reaction to a substance that you use. And this is just reality. Many people are dying and they're leaving their kids for somebody else to raise. Yes, they may have grandparents, they may have great grandparents, whatever that looks like in your family line. What if you don't have a will or a trust that delegates where your kids go? Who's going to be the legal guardians of your kids in the event that something happens to you? And this was something that I implemented in my 30s. I believe I implemented it in my 20s, but when I had my kids and my kids were very young, I may, Sheryka, have even had that conversation with you a time or two about, you know, my health, and maybe what that looks like for my kids in the event that something happens to me. But many of us, we don't even think about that in our 30s. And
Right.
anything can happen, guys. So it is serious. I didn't necessarily have the addiction in my 30s. I went through the addiction stages in my 20s, but in my 30s, things really came to light for me. Things really begin to open up, and I began to see things in a new light. And if something happened to me, even though I had a home that was purchased, I had cars and different things that would leave my kids set up, and whoever had to care for them would be set up. Even though I had written out my wishes for those kids, uh, so many people don't have that. Not only that, even as a single parent and we're taking care of our children, we automatically assume that we have legal custody of them. If you have not went in front of the courts and have court documents stating that you have legal custody or sole custody of your kids, you don't. Their fathers, their uh, grandparents, parental uh, grandparents, maternal grandparents, everybody has just as much right to your kids as you do, because you don't have
Wow.
that document. And so it's so much that we don't know, that we take for granted. And if something happens to us, we don't know where our kids are going to be ended up. We don't know if people are set in place that we trust, that it's going to take good care of them. We don't know if they're going to be placed in state care or something like that, to where they're going to be
Mm.
abused, slave traded. We just don't know. And so there's so many things that we need to look at in our 30s, that if we don't get it under control and something happens to us, the legacy, the dynamics of our family, we don't know where it's going to end up.
Right, right. That's good advice. That's good advice. And if you guys have questions as far as where to start with setting up a life insurance policy or financial plans, tune in back to season one. In our season one, in episodes 7 and episodes 19, we had guest speakers who are professionals in the area of setting up life insurance policies and financial plans. So do go back and check those episodes out. That's good advice, Anntricia. Thank you for that. And of course, I had no clue. It had never dawned on me. Especially as the mom, you birth the child, you just automatically assume, hey, that's my baby, regardless of what anybody else has to say. But thank you so much, because that is something that a lot of us we don't think about. Um, well, guys, that about wraps up this episode of the Money and Mindset podcast. So, just some key points in your 30s. Just know we've all aware and have had to make sacrifices, and that's just something that we just have to do, because we are truly adulting by then. But we can successfully get through it and reach out to other people for help if you need to, and professionals, family, whomever. So that's it for this episode.
I am your host, Anntricia Smith.
And I am Sheryka Alford.